Healing from the deep emotional scars that come from narcissistic abuse is so challenging. And one of the things that makes it so challenging among the many side effects of narcissistic abuse is rumination. So if you're struggling to heal after narcissistic abuse and you feel like your mind gets stuck and it's just replaying and rewinding and playing over and over again the what ifs, the should haves, or what might have been, or what might still come about, or the injustices that take place after narcissistic abuse, then you're going to want to watch this video. For those that don't know me, my name is Michelle. I'm a survivor myself of narcissistic abuse. I'm now a trauma-informed coach, a somatic experiencing practitioner, as well as the founder of the School of Transformation, where survivors of narcissistic abuse meet live together on Zoom every week, and we do the inner healing work together. So I'm going to leave the link here for anyone that might find that to be a helpful resource. So in order to understand how narcissistic abuse and rumination go hand in hand, we have to learn a little bit about the brain. And I know this might sound like heady information, but for me, one of the positive takeaways from doing the deep inner work to heal is how much I got to learn about myself, my brain, my body, my nervous system, my reactions, my belief system. So that being said, let's learn a little bit about what happens to our brain because of narcissistic abuse. You might have heard the expression that our brain is a meaning-making machine. So let's talk a little bit about how our brain organizes information. And understanding this is going to help us to understand why we may be struggling with certain things. And it's really going to remove that belief, what's wrong with me, which only makes us feel more stress and anxiety. So it's really going to normalize things. Okay, our brain is organized to act and feel before we think. Now, that might sound crazy, but if you think about it, have you ever been in a car and suddenly slammed on your brakes? You didn't know why, but then afterward you realize that you almost hit something. Our subconscious mind is always processing information and data that it's seeing from the external world, and it acts so much faster than our conscious mind. So our conscious mind processes data very slowly, whereas the subconscious mind processes about 27,500 times the amount of data that our conscious mind can handle. So it's always 2 steps ahead of, well, what does this have to do with narcissistic abuse? Okay, so the bottom part of our brain, the back bottom part, is our brainstem. And the brainstem controls the things that we don't have to think about. For example, our breathing, our temperature, our heart rate, right? The top part where all the folds are of the brain, that's our cortex. And that's where our logic, our thinking, our decision making, our executive functioning takes place here, right? Again, what does this have to do with narcissistic abuse? All of the data that our brain is taking in from our surroundings travels from the brainstem up, right? It doesn't travel from thoughts down. Here's where narcissistic abuse really alters the functioning of our brain. So because of the prolonged stress of narcissistic abuse, because of the extreme highs and lows, the confusion, the things that don't make sense, the psychological, mental, physical abuse, the information that the brain is taking in with all that it's dealing with the narcissistic relationship, as it's traveling up, because of the intensity of what's happening, our brain gets dysregulated and the information never reaches the top part of our brain. It never reaches the cortex. We get stuck in our midbrain, in our survival brain. And so we're taking in data and it's coming up and we're circling in this area of our brain, never reaching the cortex. When I finally understood this, everything made sense, including why it was so hard for me to just have access to clear thinking, why it was so evident that I was stuck in brain fog, why my brain was spinning and spinning and spinning and seemingly not getting anywhere. It also made sense to me why it was so difficult to realize what was happening, right? Because I didn't have access to my prefrontal attributes, to my executive command center of my brain. The higher thinking wasn't there. So I'm curious if this resonates with you. Let me know in the comments below. And so as a result of the brain being so dysregulated and not having access to that higher thinking, it's so easy to get stuck in rumination. To me, there are 3 areas that rumination really stands out. One is in the beginning of the relationship when we're going from that idealization to the discard phase. 2 is when the discard has prolonged. You're now being such negative narcissistic supply to the narcissist. That's a time when the rumination is very strong. And 3, When you're out of the relationship, when you finally realize what happened, you break free and you see all of the injustice of what happened, that's another point in time where the rumination is extremely intense. So let's break down all three of those. And then in the end of the video, I'm going to show you how you can start breaking out of rumination. The first area where we can get stuck in rumination is when the relationship goes from the idealization phase to the discard phase. And the reason is because it doesn't make sense. Like, you're not changing, you're being the exact same person, and yet you're getting a different response from the narcissist. On top of that, their signals are always mixed. You might get one response one day, a completely different the next. And so again, our brain as a meaning-making machine doesn't understand what's happening to cause the unhappiness, the reactions that the narcissist is having with you. And again, when the narcissist is going from the idealization to the discard, the things that they do can be very subtle. And you have to remember that they don't stay the same way all the time. It's that intermittent way that they have of being that confuses the brain. So the kind of rumination that takes place during this time is like this intense need to figure it out, to figure out what's the secret formula to make this person happy. And little by little, your thoughts are constantly revolving, not around being, right, or just living, but on trying to make this person happy, trying to go back to that idealization phase. And so you're asking yourself questions like, how are they going to respond? If I do this, how will they act? How will they feel? What do they need? And you become extremely hyper-focused to the external. And because the narcissist never wants to take responsibility for their actions when they're changing, right, going into this discarded phase, they have the ability to make you feel responsible for their changes. And so you start ruminating about things like, is it me? Am I the problem? And when you're really spinning on those thoughts, you'll find yourself again yanking your personality inside out, trying to make this person happy. And since you're spinning on, right, the brainstem taking in their reactions to you, and then coming up here and stopping in your midbrain because there's the dysregulation, never getting to the higher thoughts that would actually help you to realize this is wrong. Their behavior is abusive. And without getting to that place in the brain, you're spinning over and over, trying to solve the problem by yourself, making yourself responsible for everything. I know with myself, it wasn't until I was out of the relationship and I had done so much of my own healing work that I could look back. And there are times that honestly, I'm in shock with things that I allowed. I'm in shock with the fact that I didn't realize certain things and that I tolerated certain things. Then again, rather than hating on myself, understanding this information really helped me to realize that what happens to our brain when it cuts off our ability to be in the cortical regions of our brain, we don't have that thinking. And so then healing is about helping our brains to get back that ability instead of staying stuck in our survival brain, to actually be able to access our prefrontal attributes, which allow us to pause, to think clearly, to make decisions. The other time when we can get stuck in rumination is after we've been in the discard phase for a while. We can start ruminating about what once was or what we had hoped things would be like. And it's almost like the brain doesn't want to let go of what it once knew was a reality, right? Because even if the narcissist was pretending during the idealization phase, to you it was real. It felt real. And it's like the brain doesn't want to let go of that. And so when you're going through the most challenging times of the relationship, it can almost feel like your brain's behind you going, delete, delete, delete the pain. Let's remember that one good time. Because what if it comes back? And then phase 3 of rumination usually happens after the relationship has ended. You've finally woken up, or you've been discarded, or you've discarded. Either way, at some point you wake up to realize the extent of abuse you've undergone. And you look at how nobody else sees it. You look at all that you've lost, all that you've suffered, and that person seems untouched by anything. And the injustice of it can keep you ruminating on things like, what if people believe that person? What if they get away with it? What if I stay like this forever and they don't care? What if the next supply makes them happy? What if things are different with them in another relationship and I'm the one that had to deal with all of that? And the spinning and the rumination can go on and on. So if you identify with the rumination in any of those areas, then let's shift into what you can do about it. Something challenging that I had to realize when I was working through rumination is that it doesn't go away with time. Think of the thoughts that you were continually going through when you were ruminating. Think of them as like deep grooves in a road, right? Let's say there's a road and it's muddy and your car is driving down it and it's spinning in the same place over and over in a circle. Eventually there's like deep grooves. Your tires are so deeply engrooved that you try to come out and you can't. Well, it's the same thing with our neural pathways. It's like they have been deeply ingrained with this way of thinking. So time alone is not going to break us out of rumination as much as leaving a car in a rut that's stuck in a rut is going to allow it to come out. We have to actively help ourselves to break free of rumination. So here are some tips that I found to be helpful. Stepping into the witness role of the rumination or of your thought. In other words, when you notice the rumination, being able to see you and your thoughts as two separate things. So you notice the rumination, and instead of coming from that place of the rumination, you're able to say, oh, there's my brain ruminating. Oh, there are those thoughts that my mind tends to spin on. And we don't give a lot of emotional color to that. We just notice it. The more we can do that, the more we can then begin to change them. But we cannot stop rumination or change our thoughts until we're able to give ourselves some space from our thoughts. Tip number 2 has to do with changing your emotional state, right? We think of rumination as being our thoughts, so we want to change our thoughts only. The problem is that when we're spinning in our midbrain, there's a lot of intense emotions that we're spinning from. And our body is more often than not in a trauma response of either fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So we need to practice changing our state because feeling follows state, right? So if we change our state, it'll be easier to change our thoughts. And 2 states that are really helpful to practice being in is a state of joy and a state of awe. These are 2 brain states that are so helpful to combat the stress that comes with narcissistic abuse. Now you might be like, real nice, Michele, like joy. How am I supposed to feel joy when I'm feeling like my nervous system is so traumatized? I got you. I hear that because I went through the same thing. It was very hard for me to create joy. So there are little things that we can do that when your nervous system is so traumatized. And so something that I found to be really helpful was making a playlist of things that were funny, things that would make me laugh, allowing myself 5 minutes a day of just not even thinking about the narcissist, not even thinking about healing, but letting my brain be in a different state of joy, of just laughter. Now, I'm not going to lie. When I first did that and I'm looking at something funny, my body would be like, huh, that was as deep as it got. My neural pathways to joy had not been traveled for so long. They had cobwebs on them. And so it takes traveling the neural pathways of joy again and again to strengthen your body's ability to be in that emotional state. So consistency, regularity is important. It's the same thing with awe. Things that give you awe, things that can create awe. For me, nature, scenery, exotic locations, even seeing pictures, videos of them, anything majestic that just makes you feel in awe of what you're seeing. So practice even 5 times a day of being in those states, because when you're in those states, your thoughts will be easier, your thoughts will follow. Tip number 3 is practice being mindfully present. If you can't mindfully meditate, this is the next best thing, which means no matter what you're doing, from brushing your teeth to cooking to being in the shower to taking a walk, rather than being up in your head and thinking about the past or worrying about the future, you train yourself to actually be in the moment. If you're washing dishes, you feel the water on your hands, you smell the soap, you hear the clanking of the dishes. Now, when I first heard that, instead of like when you're doing chores and stuff, instead of being up in your head to be mindfully present, I was like, why would I want to do that? Like, I can get so much done up there. Like, I'm serious. Like, there's a lot of things taking place up there. And I was like, why do I want to get rid of that? When I finally started to trust it and allowed myself to be out of my head and in my body, I learned the why. The why is that in those moments, there is peace. There is stillness. There's feeling grounded. And that And because of narcissistic abuse, you're never in the moment, right? You're worried about the future, what they're going to say. You're stressing about how they reacted in the past. They steal our ability to be in the moment. And so we have to retrain ourselves. There's so much peace in the moment, and it really starts helping your nervous system to heal. And my last tip is to reach out for help. Healing from narcissistic abuse is challenging. And just like a car that's stuck in a rut and can't get out no matter how hard you're trying, eventually you're like, I need to call a tow truck, right? You need help from outside. Sometimes with narcissistic abuse, because of the damage that is created with your brain, with your nervous system, we need outside help. And that's actually why I created the School of Transformation, because as I was healing, I realized just how hard it was to do alone and how hard it was to find what really helps when you have a traumatized nervous system. And so I put together all the things that have helped me. I share all the things that I did wrong so that you guys don't have to prolong your healing journey. And I share it together during our live weekly Zoom meetings. So if you're struggling to apply what you're learning in videos, I want to invite you to come join us live in the School of Transformation. So I hope these tips help, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below.